It's half past ridiculous, and we're seeking a sentiumentium. Welcome everybody to goodness. I don't even know what number show this is. This has got to be up in double digits by now, for sure. Anyway,
16, 17.
Oh yeah, definitely. Hi Carl, how you doing?
Good. Traveling again, so hopefully I'm going to be clear and legible and stay online for the most of the show.
Yeah, well, you were pretty good last time, so I think you're all right. Mm-hmm. This week, there's a couple of things I'd like to go over. I'd like to kind of touch on blockchain, not necessarily cryptocurrencies like Litecoin or Bitcoin, although those were the progenitors to the blockchain concept. What I'd like to do is explore blockchain for other purposes, and a couple of the purposes that have come up lately are land registry, ship registry. This is the one that really got me thinking, and how this is going to, how this is going to relate to what we know of the registration system as it exists now. And Peter Meters here, he was talking a little bit earlier about the BC government's looking at implementing blockchain and feasibility studies and that sort of stuff. And is it just another control system, or is it a way that we can get out of the control system? This is this is what I want to explore. And most people don't understand what blockchain is. I don't understand it that well. But I've done a little bit of research, and from what I can see, the blockchain system allows I have to use the word registry, but I don't want to use the word registry. It's simply a database of who owns what transactions have expired or have transpired, and it cannot be messed with. That's the wonderful thing about the blockchain tech, is you can't screw with it. It doesn't matter who you are. The way it's designed, the history is all there. It's all available to everybody. Anybody can go look at the history. Anybody can go look at any of these transactions. It's in the public as far as the information, but it's in the private as far as the implementation. Now, that could be a little bit confusing, but I think you'll understand as we go through this a little bit more. I was looking at a website. The URL is medium.com, and this is an article from Michel Dialessi. I hope I said that right. My apologies if it's incorrect, but this article that I read, it explains it really, really nicely, and I don't think I could explain it any better. So what I'm going to do is basically read off the salient points of this document, and I'll kind of jump in with my own thoughts on how I think this is a really good thing for what's coming up, and that is removing the central trustee relationship that a registration system is at this time. So she starts off and says, the blockchain technology is probably the best invention since internet itself. It allows value exchange without the need for trust or for a central authority. She gives the example. Imagine you and I bet $50 on tomorrow's weather forecast in San Francisco. I bet it will be sunny, and you bet that it'll be rain. Today we have three options to manage this transaction. We can trust each other, we can turn the bet into a contract, or we can involve a neutral third party. Now, the ideal of these would be the trust. If we can trust each other, we have no need for registries. We don't have no need for any of this stuff. But chances are somebody is going to not be able to be trusted. Sad as that is. We can turn it into a contract. Now, contracts are a little more solid than simple trust, a handshake between two people. But if one of the parties decides to screw with it, then it gets really expensive and there's lots of time involved. It's just a major pain in the ass. and pretty much everybody who listens to these shows, anybody who's done anything like this knows that with a contract, the guy with the money wins, because all he's got to do is nickel and dime you to death and make it not worth your while to even pursue it. So contracts are not necessarily the best way to go about it. And the third option is to involve a neutral third party, where, sort of like a bookie, each one gives the $50 to a third party, and then at the end of the game, that third party pays out the winner. The third party can also just say, screw you guys, I'm going to Vegas, and you're just gone, and everybody loses. So that's not really such a good solution. So trust and contract aren't optimal solutions, really, because they're really easy to mess with. It says the blockchain technology is interesting because it offers us a third-party option which is secure, quick, and cheap. Blockchain allows us to write a few lines of code, a program running on the blockchain, to which both of us send $50. This program will keep the $100 safe and check tomorrow's weather automatically on several data sources. Sunny or rainy, it will transfer automatically the whole amount to the winner. Each party can check their contract logic, and once it's running on the blockchain, it can't be changed or stopped. This effort can be quite too high for a $50 bet, certainly, but imagine when selling a house or a company or a ship line or property, anything like that. So most people understand blockchains as cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin. That's one of the cryptocurrencies. And she goes into explaining this in the light of the Bitcoin. So I'm going to continue on with this. Okay, so one Bitcoin is a single unit of the Bitcoin digital currency. Just like a dollar, it has no value by itself. It has value only because we agree to trade goods and services in exchange for a higher amount of the currency under our control. And we believe others will do the same. Same thing with dollar bills, right? It's the same process. Now, to keep track of the amount of Bitcoins, each of us owns to keep track of the amount of Bitcoins each of us owns, the blockchain uses a ledger, a digital file that keeps track of all Bitcoin transactions. The ledger file is not stored in a central entity server, like a bank or in a single data center. It's distributed across the world via a network of private computers that are both storing data and executing computations. Each of these computers represents a node of the blockchain network and has a copy of the ledger file. I am running a Litecoin miner. Litecoin is like Bitcoin. It's a newer one, but it's very promising. So I have a computer on my network dedicated specifically to acting as a node. So I'm part of the Litechain network here. And I have a copy of the ledger on my computer, and it's constantly polling and doing computations and updating and keeping track of everything. So I'm actively working with Litecoin to secure their network, to secure their transactions. And anybody can do this. It doesn't cost anything other than the electricity and the internet to run the computer. And depending upon how fast your computer is, you can actually make a little bit because every one of these blocks that you process, that you maintain, they pay you a little bit, and so it's not you're not serving for nothing. You're getting something out of it. So the process is, if David wants to send Bitcoins to Sandra, he broadcasts a message to the network that says the amount of Bitcoins in his account should go down by 5, and the amount of Sandra's account should go up by the same quantity. Each node in the network will receive the message and apply the requested transactions to their copy of the ledger, thus updating the account balances. Now you can imagine there's not just one single ledger. There's hundreds of thousands of these ledgers, and they're always being updated constantly, and they all have to agree with one another. So you can't break into one computer, change the ledger, and mess up somebody's Bitcoin, because you can't do it. You don't have the computing power to mess with the entire system. It's not simply physically not possible. The fact that the ledger is maintained by a group of connected computers rather than a centralized entity like a bank has several implications. While in our bank system, we only know our own transaction and account balances. On the blockchain, everyone can see everyone else's transactions. While you can generally trust your bank, the Bitcoin network is distributed, and if something goes wrong, there's no help desk to call or anyone to sue, which, sure, that's a downside. However, we address this a little farther down in the article. The blockchain system is designed in such a way that no trust is needed. Security and reliability are obtained via special mathematical functions and code. And the way the code works, we're not going to get into this in a significant way, but we'll touch on it a little bit, just so people understand it. Sorry, buddy, we can't go out right now. I'm busy. Go chew your bone. Okay, in order to perform transactions on the blockchain, you need a wallet or a piece of software on your computer or your device that maintains your portion of the ledger. Okay, it's a program that allows you to store and exchange your cryptocurrencies, or your bitcoins in this case. Since only you should be able to spend your bitcoins, each wallet is protected by a special cryptographic method that uses a unique pair of different but connected keys, a private and a public key. If a message is encrypted with a specific public key, only the owner of the paired private key will be able to decrypt and read the message. This technology has been out for a long, long time. I used it, 20 years ago with a program called Pretty Good Privacy, which was an email encryption. And it was rock solid then, and it's only gotten better since then. So these encryption methods are well proven, and although not absolutely perfect in and of themselves, you can hack anything. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. It's a matter of time and horsepower. If you've got enough time and enough horsepower, you can do it. But if it changes in the time you're trying to decrypt it, then your decryption is a waste of time. So yeah, it's relatively safe. Okay, we don't need to go through any of that stuff. When encrypting a transaction request with your wallet's private key, you are generating a digital signature that is used by blockchain computers to double-check the source and authenticity of the transaction. The digital signature is a string of text that is the result of a combination of your transaction request and your private key. Therefore, it cannot be used for other transactions. If you change a single character in the transaction request message, the digital signature will change. So no potential attacker can change your transaction request or alter the amount of bitcoins you're sending. This is one of the wonderful things about this blockchain technology, is that you can't mess with it. Each node in the blockchain is keeping a copy of the ledger, such as my second computer sitting beside me here. So how does a node know what your account balance is? The blockchain system doesn't keep track of account balances at all. It only records each and every transaction that's requested. The ledger, in fact, does not keep track of balances. It only keeps track of every transaction that's broadcast within the Bitcoin network, or the blockchain network. To know your wallet balance, you need to analyze and verify all the transactions that ever took place on the whole network connected to your wallet. This balance verification is performed thanks to links to previous transactions. In order to send 10 bitcoins to John, Mary has to generate a transaction request that includes links to previous incoming transactions whose total balance equals or exceeds 10 bitcoins. These links are called inputs. Nodes on the network will verify that the total amount of these transactions equal or exceeds 10 bitcoins, and that those inputs were not yet spent. In fact, every time you reference inputs in a transaction, those are considered not valid in any future transaction. This is all performed automatically in Mary's wallet and double-checked by the Bitcoin network nodes. She only sends 10 Bitcoin transactions to John's wallet using his public key. So how can the system trust input transactions and consider them valid? It checks all the previous transactions that are correlated to the wallet you use to send Bitcoins via the references that each one has as inputs. To simplify and speed up the verification process, a special record of unspent transactions is kept by the network nodes. Thanks to this security check, it's not possible to double spend Bitcoins. Okay. let me go down a little farther. The Bitcoin network orders transactions, excuse me, by putting them together into groups called blocks. Each block contains a definite amount of transactions and a link to the previous block. This is what puts one block after the other in time. Blocks are therefore organized in a time-related chain. That gives the name of the whole system, the blockchain. Transactions in the same block are considered to have happened at the same time, and transactions not yet in a block are considered unconfirmed. Each node can group transactions together into a block and broadcast it to the network as a suggestion for what block should be next. Since any node can suggest a new block, how does the system agree on what block should be next? In order to be added to the blockchain, each block must contain an answer to a complex mathematical problem created using an irreversible cryptographic hash function. The only way to solve such mathematical problem is to guess random numbers that combined with the previous block content generate a defined result, usually a number below a certain value. It could take about a year for a typical computer to guess the right number and solve the mathematical problem. However, due to the high number of computers in the network that are guessing numbers, a block is solved on average of every 10 minutes. The node that solves such mathematical problem acquires the right to place the next block in the chain and broadcast it to the whole network. This may seem superfluous, but hang on, because this makes a lot of sense. What if two nodes solve the problem at the same time and spread their blocks to the network simultaneously? In this case, both blocks are broadcast, and each node builds on the block that it received first. However, the blockchain system requires each node to be built immediately on the longest blockchain available. So if there is ambiguity about which is the last block, as soon as the following block gets solved, each node will adopt the longest chain as the only option. Due to the low probability of solving blocks simultaneously, it's almost impossible that multiple blocks are solved at the same time over and over again, building different tails. So the whole blockchain stabilizes quickly to one single string of blocks that every node agrees on. The disagreement about which block represents the end of the chain tail opens up the potential for fraud again. If a transaction happens to be in a block that belongs to a shorter tail, once the next block is solved, such transactions will go back to the unconfirmed transactions as all the others included in block B. You'll have to, sorry, it's written with references to pictures, so I can't really, I'm trying. Okay, let's see how Mary could leverage the end of chain ambiguity to perform a double spending attack. Mary sends money to John. John then ships the product to Mary. Now, since nodes always adopt the longer tail as the confirmed transactions, if Mary could generate a longer tail that contains a reverse transaction with the same input references, John would be out both his money and his product. So how does the system prevent this kind of fraud? Each block contains a reference to the previous block, and that reference is part of the mathematical problem that needs to be solved in order to spread the following block to the network. So it's extremely hard to pre-compute a series of blocks due to the high number of random guesses needed to solve a block and place it on the blockchain. Mary's in a race against the rest of the network to solve the math problem that allows her to place the next block on the chain. And even if she solves it before anyone else, it's very unlikely she could solve 2, 3, or more blocks in a row, since every time she's competing against the whole network. So, could Mary use a super fast computer to generate enough random guesses to compete with the whole network in solving blocks? Well, yes. But even with a very, very fast computer, due to the large amount of members on the network, it's very unlikely that Mary could solve several blocks in a row at the exact time needed to perform a double spending attack. She would need to control 50% of the computing power of the whole network to have 50% chance to solve a block before some other node does. And even in this case, she has a 25% chance to solve 2 blocks in a row. The more blocks to be solved in a row, the lower the probability that Mary can succeed. So even though the data is out there and it's available to everybody, because of the distributed model, no one computer or no one bank of computers is going to have enough power to be able to even make a dent in the security of this system, which I really, really like. Okay, there's a whole bunch more information in here, but I think we're going to, that's everybody's has kind of a basic idea. I know it's complicated, but essentially what it's doing is it's putting transactions out there, making sure the transactions are accurate, and distributing a record of those transactions throughout the network to thousands and thousands and thousands of nodes on the network. So there's no way the system is designed so that it can't be tampered with. And although I'm sure somebody's going to come up with a way to do it, they'll figure out a way to fix it really fast, because this is a huge matter of pride for an awful lot of people. Now, when you look at it from the perspective outside of financial transactions, of currency, when you look at it from the perspective of, well, let's just say land. Okay, you're buying a house. You have the option right now to either register your house with a central registry, which is written down on a piece of paper and stuck in a file cabinet somewhere, with a whole bunch of legal riders attached to it. We all know all about that, how when you register something, you're setting up a trustee relationship. You're signing away ownership, essentially, of what you're registering. With the blockchain system, there's no central registry. There's no trustee there. There's no organization or group of people, group of companies, or any company who can say, I hold this information, because it's in a decentralized model. It's distributed across the network. So in my mind, in my thinking of this, if we adopt this, we destroy that trustee relationship. There's no longer any organization, any government body that can say, well, you signed it over to us. Because you didn't. All you did, you recorded it in a ledger that cannot be touched, cannot be messed with. So if anybody has any questions of whether or not you own that property, they can just go and look at the ledger, and there it is. There's a transaction. It's all on the up and up, and it's perfect. Think of the ramifications of this. They can no longer charge you rent. Land tax, the property tax is rent. Read the documents. If you read your mortgage, or if you read your title documents, you are listed as a tenant, because you've signed it away. You've given, you may have paid the money for it, or thought you paid the money for it, generated the money for it, but you immediately, same day as you bought it, you signed it away. And most people don't even realize this. So I'm really excited about the concept of using the blockchain for automobiles, for land, for anything that you want to own, because it's a private record, a decentralized private record that can't be messed with, and it can't be falsified. There's just no way to do it. The way the math works, the way the system is designed, you can't make a false declaration. You can't have a false piece of paper. You can't have a forgery in this system. It doesn't work that way. So any thoughts on this so far?
I'm engrossed. Because to be honest, I don't know that much myself about the blockchain. I've kind of steered away from it a little bit, even though I was aware of Bitcoin, which was kind of the first leap into all of this cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. Even in the very early stages, I was given the opportunity to join it. Basically when a Bitcoin was like less than $1. Now it's $4,000. So
yep.
If I was interested in money, I'm kind of kicking myself right now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, think of it this way. If you go into a small town, just, anywhere, 2,000 people in the town, whatever, you buy a house, you can either go to City Hall, register it with City Hall, do all that stuff, and then anybody who has a complaint has to go to City Hall, look up the record, and see whether or not you actually own it. Or, with the blockchain model, you can buy the house, and you can send a copy of the bill of sale, for lack of a more apt term, to everyone in the town, so that everybody has a copy of this, and everybody keeps it. And if anything changes, that record is automatically updated so that regardless of who you go talk to in the town, you're always looking at the updated record of this. And there's no one single person that can say, I control this record, except for the owner of the property. This is the concept of the blockchain. And
okay, well, let me just have a quick question on that one then.
Okay.
Because obviously, when it comes to property and things like that, we have the concepts, not the concepts. We have the legal issue of liens. Are they going to be a part of that registry in any way? Because obviously, ownership is one thing, but you know, if it's a land transfer, for instance, or even a property transfer where you want pure title, then if there are any liens involved, then you're not going to get that pure title.
Well, if there's anything,
potentially a factor.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. With the land registry, again, it's a little different than a cryptocurrency. Because if if somebody sends you 5 Bitcoins, they send you 5 Bitcoins. There's no rider attached to the Bitcoins, right?
Yeah.
So with the blockchain land ledger, I would imagine that there would be a flag on there saying, is this for clear? Is there or is there anything outstanding with this? And that would be part of the ledger. Now, ideally,
so again, we'd have to look at how to implement that. I guess that's the next step on that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and there's people a lot smarter than I am that are actually doing this. But from Joe Average point of view, that's not really something we need to worry about. Other than it comes up and does it exist? Well, I'm sure it does exist. And if it doesn't, I'm sure there would be a blockchain set up for liens for outstanding, things of that nature. But But I think that the idea that really got me excited about this when I was looking at it was that the control is taken away from the central registry and put in the hands of the actual owner. Complete, utter control. So as far as absolute title, yeah, I would think that if you go through the process and you do your transaction on the blockchain and no flags come up that say that somebody else has a claim to this, then you would have absolute title. That would be your absolute title. And if somebody wants to make a claim, they're going to have to go through the entire transaction record all the way back. I mean, initially, when it first happens, the first 3 days, yeah, because there's not really a huge paper trail. But 10 or 15 years, when whatever property is passed to 8 or 10 hands, then there's going to be a much more detailed record of all of the transactions that have occurred with that property. And someone who has a claim it has to be a legitimate claim. It's not like the banks where they can just say, well, I own it, I have a piece of paper, and nobody has anything to say about it because the guy has a piece of paper, right? You can't go back. The records are hidden. You can't go back as an individual, as a property owner. You're not allowed to go get the previous records. You can't go back and look at the entire property record of that property because there's so much fraud in there, they keep it hidden. They make sure you can't find it. Right? I've
been through to the land registry office a few times, and they really, really don't want you looking at any of that information.
No. With the blockchain, they can't stop you from looking at it because it's public record. It's right there in front of you. Anybody can look at it. If you're looking at buying a piece of property or buying a ship or buying a car or whatever, you can go and look at the history of that right from the time the manufacturer let it go. Now with land, okay, you're not actually buying land. All you're doing is you're buying the right to control that land, because who are you buying it from? Who had it in the first place, right?
So you're going to take it anyway.
That's right, exactly. you know, like a house, real estate, you can trace that back to the guy who built the house, right? And who he sold it to, who they had sold it to, and so on and so forth. But for, you know, 100 acres of bush, who did you buy it from? Who did they buy it from? Where did it come from? Who originally owned it? And if you actually go back, you're going to find out it was probably taken by force at some point. So it's stolen property. Yeah. Nobody has any right to do anything to it. And whoever possesses it, if they can hold on to it, they have the right to be there. Lousy system. Totally agree with the lousy system. We should all cooperate because there's plenty of room for everybody. So we shouldn't be squabbling over crap like that. We shouldn't need it. And hopefully, if this blockchain technology moves the way I think it will, it should take away a lot of that. You know, we should be able to get back to the point of claiming land. You put up a public notice. I would like to build on this piece of land. Does anybody complain? If they complain, you deal with their complaints. If nobody complains, build on it. Who cares? Mm-hmm. Right? Be responsible.
So in reality, then, I think if you, if you really want to look at how this moves forward and how it works in the real world, right now the registries of all of them for ownerships through government for land and for vehicles and everything else is literally done through local and provincial, in Canada anyway, state in the US, and federal governments. They hold the registry and ownership of everything based on that. So if this becomes a public-wide implementation of blockchain, it will remove the government registration from the process. It would probably still give the corporations a lot of power, especially the initiators of, builders of property, for instance, builders of makers of vehicles, because they're the original corporations, and they would then have to release that information to the blockchain, and then we as purchasers after that continue with that process, but no continued registration, no requirement to re-register your vehicle every year or 2 years as we do in Canada, which is just a money grab anyway. It has nothing to do with any reason other than to keep paying money. And probably the same with licensing. I mean, to what extent does blockchain, exist and move into different areas of our lives and different aspects of already registered licenses and things like that. Driver's licenses is a prime example. I don't even know whether that would be a factor. Anything to remove it from government control and authority is, in my view, is a good thing.
Yeah, well, licensing, I mean, the licensing is such a convoluted pile of crap to begin with. I mean, a license is permission to do something that's inherently lawful. And if it's inherently lawful, why do you need permission? Now, anybody who's driven in the city, anybody who's driven, in my experience in Richmond, a license is not a certificate of competency, because
absolutely not.
Absolutely not. You don't have to know what you're doing to get a license. So I don't know how that would relate, excuse me, to blockchain tech. Probably wouldn't, because blockchain is more a ledger of ownership, or of transactions, and learning to drive, being competent to travel from point A to point B at 60 miles an hour in a 2-ton battering ram. It's not really a transaction. I mean, you could probably look at it as such, because you're making a contract with the other people that are out there saying, yeah, I'm actually not going to hurt you. But I don't really see it implementing in that fashion. But when the centralized...
Again, it's potentially a concept, an idea that may work. Doesn't doesn't work in the same way as the current licensing process, but the idea is there that it's a completely public registry. We don't like using that word, database, let's say, of all competent drivers or travelers, if we want to be truthful again.
Yeah, and that comes in.
That's certainly a way that can be checked.
Yeah, and that comes down, that asks the question of, who is competent to say who is competent. And, do we all have to go and take a 6-hour course on a racetrack with a professional race car driver to learn the ins and outs of dealing with handling the vehicle?
I think that has a lot to do with where you are as well, because I've gone through advanced police driver training, so if you're driving around Florida all year, then the only thing you have to worry about is a hurricane coming through every now and again, but the rest of the year it's hot and sunny and a little bit of rain every now and again. But likes of Canada, we have very definite seasons, and the way people drive, when it gets to the fall season, and then especially when it gets into winter, they just don't seem to change the driving. It doesn't click in their mind, and they don't necessarily have the training. I went through all the ice course training, so we were taught to literally play in the ice.
Yep.
And get the vehicle into a skid and see how far you could go, and still recover it, and how to recover it. They just don't teach you that as part of the main driving. And that's why there's a lot of accidents in winter, because it's just they're not trained. They just have no idea on how to drive in icy conditions or snowy conditions. I see it all the time, because I travel on the road too, and I don't worry about me being on the road. I know that, and I have recovered many times in high-speed skids, to the extent that I was doing 80 kilometers an hour not last year, the year before. Hit a curve and went into a sideways skid, and I went a long way into recovering that. I still ended up on the edge of a snowbank, but typically
wheels down, hopefully.
Sorry?
Wheels down, hopefully.
Oh yeah. No, it was a slow speed stop against the snowbank, but I'd gone about 300 yards at that point or more, trying to control this skid, to the point that I found out from the fire marshal, who was passing and stopped when he saw me a short time afterwards. He basically said, "Well, you're lucky, because everybody else that goes into a skid on this corner, they put it on the roof in the ditch."
Yeah.
So that was automatic training, but everybody else, they just completely lose it, because the way that curve was designed, you automatically go into a sideways skid, and you will roll it and put it on the roof in a ditch. So if you have the training, you can stop that from happening. That's what we do, and then that should be registered. That's part of the whole process, I think.
Oh, I certainly agree, and coming up with a workable, honest and legitimate system, that may take some work. It's certainly gonna be a lot of very smart people thinking and debating the system. Years ago, when I was riding motorcycle, I was of the opinion that anybody who wants to get into a car should spend 5 years on a motorcycle first. And what that's going to do is give them the spatial awareness and the presence of mind to know what's going on around them. I have seen so many people in cars who, when I was riding motorcycle, I could ride right up next to somebody and sit there for 10 minutes before they even realized I was there. And one of the things that I learned riding motorcycle really fast was to know where everybody was at all times. I knew for 100 yards around me, I knew exactly where everything was. And you have to stay alive. It's necessary in a motorcycle, and it's one of the first things you learn. So
one of the things, yeah, because I did the same thing. I spent the first 4 years of my young, youthful years riding a motorcycle and getting up to a slightly more high-powered one as well. But yeah, the way they even taught you at the time was to, like bicycles, you kind of ride towards the sidewalk, towards the curb. If I'd have listened to that, I'd be dead now.
that's right.
Because very quickly I learned that the best place to be is towards the center of the lane, or even, towards the center of the road. And yeah, it might piss off a car behind you because he can't pass you because you're taking up the whole road. But typically I was driving faster than they were anyway, so that didn't matter. But there's a few times, that people have pulled out because they can't see you, especially if there's trees down the sidewalk. That blocks your profile, and people have pulled out on me. And if I'd have been where they taught me to be, I'd have driven right into the side of them and over the handlebars, into side of trucks and all sorts. But because I was in a position where I could be seen, that's one, that stopped them pulling out. Two, if they did pull out, I was in a position on the road where I could get out of the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. There's a lot that having a motorcycle experience teaches you later on as a vehicle driver, a car driver, or whatever, trucks or anything, because you have to be so much aware of what it is you're driving in, and its capabilities, its dimensions, and so on.
Oh, most definitely. And, my first experience, well, not my first experience, but my first actual in the road, in the city traveling experience was, I was, 14 years old. And the people that were living upstairs, Kelly, I don't know where he is anymore. He was a good friend at the time. He was a professional stunt driver from California, and he had a King Cobra with all kinds of modifications, and the thing was insanely powerful. And he was the first one to actually teach me anything as far as handling an automobile. And this was in Red Deer, Alberta in November, on the ice, in a car that, weighs 2,200 pounds. It had 600 horsepower. And I learned, within the first 2 blocks that this is a weapon. This will kill people. And, it completely changed my way of thinking as far as that goes. So, yeah, if we can come up with a viable system where you can ledger competency, and maybe there could be levels of competency, so up until up until you get a 2 stars, you're limited to 150 horsepower. You're limited to a certain weight or class, something like that. Yeah, the system has to change, because what's going on right now is ridiculous. There's too many people that are just, I'm going to annoy a lot of people, but there's just stupid people out there who shouldn't be on the road, and there's no way they should even have gotten permission to be in a car, much less travel. The Peter asks, is there legislation or acts that guide blockchain? Because that will be the deciding factor in a lot of participants. Right now, no. It's open source. It's driven by the industry. And the industry specifically is surrounded by trust. If somebody screws up and damages that trust of that industry, they're not going to be working there very long. They're not going to be allowed to access the industry. So it's because of the nature of blockchain technology. It's in my opinion, it's self-policing, and only the best will survive.
I guess the idea is to remove that concept of. See, we spoke about this last week because Peter again was asking about registration of businesses and how you get to work for certain larger corporations, if you wanted to be a private contractor, if you weren't registered and given a license to do all this stuff. The idea is that that's not really about free enterprise. That's about control. That's how you manage a business sector or some kind of sector and allow the extraction of money from it because of the process of registration and licensing. So the whole point behind the blockchain thing is you don't want legislation to cover it necessarily, because that, again, it's all control based. It's money based. You've got to do this, and if you do this, then you get a license. If you register, then you're allowed to function within this this arena. If you don't do any of this, then you're not allowed.
Yeah,
that's not really where we want to go. So blockchain is to move away from that. Yes, to have the registry, prove that you are capable of doing it. But free enterprise certainly is that. Next to it, there's potentially a tick box thing, like eBay, for instance, where they have the what do they call it? Basically, you get a voting system, as to whether you're a good eBay seller or buyer and whatever. We'd have to do the same kind of thing, so that the better you are, the more people you deal with, you get a rating system associated with your, blockchain entry.
Yeah,
I think that's the way that we can keep that going as a completely public, non-registered, non-licensed environment.
Yeah, for merchants, for tradesmen, that would be, or not necessarily tradesmen, but merchants, manufacturers, anybody who does work for others, where there's really no need for license. There's no organizational body that's controlling the system. Yes, that would work great. As far as like tradesmen, doctors, lawyers, well, not lawyers because we don't need lawyers, but physicians, tradesmen, anybody who does very specific things, and it's a complex field, such as my field, tool and die making. The system, it's already in place. That's already there, and it's controlled by the schools. When I completed my tool and die, I had to write the interprovincial exams, and they were a very comprehensive exam to test my competency of whether or not I could do the job. And it wasn't a license to do the job. It was a certificate of competency. And yes, the blockchain system could be used in that fashion, where you want to go work for somebody, you give them your blockchain hash, they type it into a computer, there's your record, there's your school records, there's everything about it. And they can see, yes, you went through the exams, you passed with flying colors, and you're there. Along with that, there can also be what Carl mentioned in a rating system, where every job you do, the receiver of that work would give you a rating. If they're happy with you, if it was honest, if everything worked out as agreed upon, and it would be open to everybody. I mean, this could be a really good system if it was set up properly. It could be really complicated and convoluted and a major pain in the ass if we don't do it right. But I think, the initial release of this, it's probably going to be a problem. There's going to be a lot of people who don't want to go through the hassle of doing it. But I think in time, we're going to find out that this is a really good system, and we'll get to the point where only the best survive. Now, there was another question. Where did it go? Okay, so if a corporation is already registered in a governmental forum, then what? Well, if you look at the OPPT filings, the governmental forums are gone. They don't exist anymore. They've been foreclosed. They're shut down. So it doesn't matter. We need to come up with a new system right away to take over this. Right now, we're stuck using that, even though it is gone. It's over. It's no longer in force and effect. But it's the only one we have at this time. So
I think the step of moving out, because I was just listening to what you were saying about and what I mentioned about the blockchain, and how you as an individual can go through the rest of your life doing whatever it is that you want to do and be rated, and you could work for yourself. You could be a private contractor, like we all should be. We shouldn't be employed by corporations, by companies. We should all be working for ourselves.
well,
And the whole point behind doing that is that we can then be rated on how good or bad we are. So it's in your own interest to be good, because you need a rating to get further work.
yeah. Well,
Now,
the corporate
move
model.
on to the next step, because really we don't want to work, or we don't want to have to work for money. We don't want to have this slave system, which is really what we have right now.
Well,
But there does have to be a transition.
Yes, there has to be a transition, and the transition is going to be, from my point of view anyway, from a corporate model to a cooperative model. Now, there's nothing wrong with 40 or 50 people getting together and building a manufacturing system to produce whatever, because if I want to produce cell phone cases, okay, I can't design it, make the mold, run the presses, pack the boxes, ship it all. I can't do all that myself. There needs to be a team involved. But if we move it into a cooperative model where everyone does what their talents are for the benefit of the whole of the group, everybody is equal within that group. Everyone gets an equal share, if we're still dealing with money. Then the corporate control, which is management makes all the money and the workers are just slaves and they get a pittance, even though they're the ones doing the work. Any system can run without management, but they can't run without the workers. When the workers become a cooperative, not a union, okay? Unions were kind of a step in the right direction, but they lost sight of their goal, and they became a corporate control of their own. But a very similar model where everybody who is actually doing the work does what they do so that the entire group benefits. Now, if you love working with wood and you want to build furniture, there's nothing wrong with getting 24 people together and go, hey guys, let's just build furniture. I'm really good at running a lathe. This guy's really good at sanding. This guy's really good at finishing. Let's just cooperate and make awesome furniture. Why can't that work? I mean, why can't we make something like that function properly so that we all benefit? And if you take money out of the equation, if you take profit out of the equation, which is what's coming very shortly, you're going to do it because you love to do it, or you see a need for it, and you see the benefit in fulfilling that need, like picking up the trash or watering the plants in the park.
Well, the question that I've asked in my own mind that relates to why that might not work, or it should work, whichever way you think, is that if we actually make things based on quality and the fact that they will last a long time, then the corporations or the conglomerates, or even in the case of a local agreement between people that have a love for doing whatever it is that they're doing, they will have limited work, because if they're making the best product that they can, then there's not planned obsolescence. There's not a requirement to go and buy something from them again, in 2 years' time, because the previous stuff that was crap broke, which is exactly what is happening now, because it's all based on profit. It's planned obsolescence. It's profit, and how the companies stay in business and how they continue to make money, and that's what it's all about. So going to that other model where you're making the best product that you can that will last the longest means that your group will only be functioning for small periods of time. Not in the first instance, because of course everybody wants your product, but once everybody has it, what happens then? You know, you're not actually working anymore, except for people that come back every now and again, and you know they want something extra, or they want something different, or they want something new again, and your time for working will actually reduce, and that's across the board. You know, that's not just for that particular company, because if that model exists across the board, we will end up with products that will last a very long time and will be good quality. And that's what we should have. That's the way it should work. And
Well,
again, that removes the profit margin, the corporation's reason to exist, and so on.
yeah, and that's what I see coming with what's going on in the financial end of this, where the financials don't matter anymore. There's no you're not seeking profit. You don't have to earn a living. Your living is assured. When we get there, and it's coming around. I mean, believe it. When you look at what's going on in the world in the background, it's obvious that it's coming around. People who make crap aren't going to survive because nobody's going to want it. I mean, if I go and I'm looking for an automobile, I'm not going to buy some cheap thing that was made on a shoestring budget and by people who don't really care, and it's not really the best engineering, and it's not really the best quality product or the best quality materials. I'm going to look for something that's built like a Mercedes or a Rolls, something that is designed to last, that's built. People who build it take incredibly large amounts of pride in their work, and everybody's going to do that because money won't matter. So you're gonna go for the best you can get. You're gonna go with the best bicycle you can buy. You're gonna get the best furniture you can get. Chances are you're going to go to some local craftsman and say, hey, I want your stuff because I really like your stuff. You do a really good job. That will control itself. I mean, the people who are in it for, well, right now in it for the money, who are making the cheapest possible product as quickly as possible and don't really care whether it lasts, they're not gonna survive. They won't be in business. Because nobody will pick up their stuff. Why would you do that? You know, it doesn't make any sense to me, especially when money is not an object. You know, if it didn't matter that the Porsche was $260,000 and the number didn't mean anything, you would not buy a Hyundai. You'd buy a Porsche because it's a better car.
Well, it's a faster car.
Well, it's
better.
It's built better. It lasts longer. It has fewer problems. It's more comfortable. It handles better. I'm using Porsche as an example. Sure, it's really fast. I mean, but you could also go with the top end Volvo or the top end Mercedes, right? The top end Mercedes, unless you go to an AMX, they're not fast. They're not high horsepower, but they're built. They'll go forever if you take care of them. And it doesn't take a lot to take care of them. But because of the corporate model, the new Mercedes now is a joke because if you need a new radiator, you have to get one specially built for that car. The numbers have to match or the computer will not accept it. It's ridiculous. And they had to do that because otherwise they weren't selling any parts. Because the cars just didn't break.
Yeah, and OEMs and the third party was getting in there too, and they're moving away from that model where they will allow that in their higher end cars.
Yep, and the third party add-ons, some of them will probably survive if they're really innovative and they do a really good job. But you're not going to buy cheap Chinese parts for your car because you can't afford the real parts, right? When I think that this whole concept, it's mind-boggling. I'm barely scratching the surface. I've been thinking about this for years about this, and I'm just still barely scratching the surface about what would a society look like? What would life look like if money didn't matter? Everything changes. Everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the employment model disappears for a start.
Yep.
In a real big way. I mean, it doesn't mean that people don't want to work. They don't want to do things. It's just that their reason for doing them and the job that they might currently be doing will no longer exist. There's no necessary reason for it. So
yep.
There's a very, very big change in that regard, for sure.
Yep. Automation becomes viable at that point. Because there's thousands and thousands of jobs out there who will, first of all, simply will evaporate because they're not needed. When, financial services, nobody needs financial services, then that whole industry's gone. The concept of mass automation, which if you look at the way the Japanese do things, they're automated like crazy. And Hondas, Acuras, they're nice cars. They're well built. Now they're some of them are limited because they got to skimp on materials and that. But the engineering, the construction, the fit and finish, the reliability is amazing. I mean, I had a 1990 Civic. I had it for 19 years, and I abused that car. I mean, anybody who likes cars would probably beat me up because I didn't take care of it. But it still lasted 19 years, and it was still running when I got rid of it. They're really well built. They're highly automated. It won't matter if the entire factory has 3 people working in it and they're making, what used to take 200 people to do, because nobody has to work. Nobody has to make a living. The automation isn't taking jobs away because jobs don't matter. You do what you love to do, and you do what you love well because you love it. It's going to be such a different model.
Yeah, I think the employment question really is going to be a major. I think probably a head teaser, a mind blower, because people just don't get that concept. That they don't need to work. And that, I mean, the first question is, who's going to do what? Who's going to do this job? Well, half the time those jobs don't need to be done. They won't exist in a society that behaves in a completely different way. Well,
one of the arguments that keeps coming up over and over when this idea is brought out is who's going to pick up the trash. And yeah. I just want to slap these people, because deal with your own damn trash. Why do you have to have some guy come to your house and pick up a bag and throw it in a truck and drive it away? Why don't you take care of it yourself? Maybe you'll learn.
Question in this one anyway.
Maybe you'll learn
how much trash you generate.
That's right. Maybe you'll learn to generate less trash.
I've got a small bag. Yeah, I've got a small bag that I put out in my trash, but I go past other people's and they've got 3 bins worth. What the hell are they doing to generate 3 bins worth of trash?
Yep, because they don't have to take care of them. Take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's the concept. It changed the way you think about life. It touches on what we touched on the first couple of shows, and that's personal responsibility. If you don't have a trash man coming and picking up your trash every day, you're going to have to deal with it yourself. So are you going to continue dealing with landfills, or are you going to reuse, recycle, repurpose, reduce your consumption? When we go to the stores, looking for food, we're not going to go to Safeway anymore. We're going to go to the farmer. So you take your own bag which is your potato bag, and you go to the farmer and you fill it up full of potatoes and you shake his hand and you tell him he's doing an awesome job and you love his potatoes and he has a big smile on his face and everybody's happy, and you go home and there's no waste. It's just, you really got to think about this from the point of view of how would you deal with it, not how would society deal with it. Look at it from an individual point of view. If you were in an area, like I've lived in the farms, I've lived out in the countryside where we didn't have trash pickup. If the power went down, it took 2 days for somebody to come and fix it. You couldn't just get on the phone and phone somebody and they would come out and deal with it because we were 10 miles out of town and it was a pain in the ass and nobody wanted to do it. So you learned to do it yourself. You learned to be self-reliant. You learned to be responsible for your own stuff. You took care of your stuff. Once a month, we loaded up a trailer and took it to the dump. And now the dump was disgusting. It was a horrible place, but it was one of my... I can't say favorite things to do, but it was certainly an event in our family when we loaded up the trailer and went to the dump. We got to see what our usage was, what we're throwing away, what stuff we didn't need. And, a lot of it, we probably could have done something different with it. And I can see that, like for tin cans, right? If we're still buying stuff in tin cans or still getting stuff in tin cans, how the non-profit model would bring more people into squashing their cans flat, saving them up until you got a big bin of them and you take them in and to the recycling place. Because you have the time to do it. You have the means to do it. It's not costing you anything and it's helping out. So your whole view of this is going to change when you really wrap your mind around what is a non-profit based living going to look like. Excuse me, I got to clear my lungs out.
Yeah, it's a question that same as you, Jim, that I've thought about in so many ways because I've had this discussion since probably 2008 with people who I was trying to inform about the monetary system and what a bad thing it actually was, and it was, control and slavery, and this is what was happening, and people that couldn't believe what was happening. Now, nearly 10 years later, everybody pretty much knows what's happening, but we're still not doing anything about it. We're still just carrying on with the same old shit. But the idea that I was trying to put across to people that really don't need money, and I was doing this in 2008, that they literally had no concept. It was one of those they don't know what they don't know things. They could not get their mind around thoughts of no money. It was completely alien to them. These days, there are a lot more people that really do get it. They understand it more now. They comprehend that more now, and I think if there are more and more people able to take that on board, the chances are that we will be able to make a difference and make a change in our society. Because if we don't do that and we continue to think along the lines that money is a requirement of our existence, then firstly, things won't change. And secondly, the controllers that currently do control everything based on that money will continue to have that power and continue to have that control. When we can turn around and say, we don't have confidence in money anymore, we don't need it anymore, we don't want it anymore, then we have the possibility of changing. Until we can do that, unfortunately, we're going to be stuck. And that's what I saw in 2008, 2009, 2010, when it was really a big topic of discussion. And People just couldn't get it. Literally now they do. And, we have a chance of making a change. We have a chance of doing away with what's been done to us over, centuries, based on a control system, because that's what it is. There's no value, no real value in anything. Once you get it, once you comprehend what's being done, there is no value. It's just all about faith. It's all about, trusting that this thing in your pocket's actually worth something, and it's not. Just a goddamn piece of paper or a piece of plastic, depending where you come from. With some numbers and ink on it. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I can still see a purpose for a means of exchange. I don't see a means of exchange as a bad thing necessarily, and for international stuff. I mean, we've got listeners here that are from Europe, and if they have something, say one of the ladies in Europe makes amazing jewelry, and I would really like to have a piece of her jewelry. I would like to be able to offer her something that I have, but maybe there's something that I'm doing because I'm a tool and die maker. I'm an inventor. Maybe I don't do anything that she's interested in. So would there still be the place to offer her something that she can take to someone else as a means of exchange to just as, for equity? Yeah, certainly the model of Ubuntu, of gifting, awesome, beautiful. It doesn't always work. It's not always feasible. So, I can still see them.
It would be if the whole world was doing that. The problem is that, you might have one country that wants to go on Ubuntu and the rest of the world is still on the Federal Reserve central bank model. You're screwed. It's not going to happen. You have to have money to interact with it. But until the whole world can go that route, we're stuck. We're stuck in that until the whole world can make that change. Because we can't do this country by country. It just doesn't work that way. Certainly for international trade, for internal trade and internal exchange, yeah, I get it. You just produce stuff because you want to produce it. You don't need money. So if you want to make a piece of jewelry and stick it out on a table outside your house, and people want to pick it up, and maybe they have something that they want to drop off with you. I mean, that's just that's the concepts of everybody giving. It's not an exchange process. It's stuff that I've spoken of in the past as well. The concepts of exchange and the concepts of value are the two things that basically screw us over, because we feel that everything, or we've been told that everything should have a value attached to it. And if we give this away to somebody, or it goes into somebody else's possession from yours, then that then requires an exchange. So you now have to give me something back of the same, similar, or greater value, and then we're all good.
Well,
if we just are able to give, and everything will come back to us because we will receive, not necessarily from the same person, but you give a piece of jewelry to somebody, they go and give something to somebody else comes round, and never mind 6 degrees of separation, one day somebody comes up to your table, you might have a little wanted thing. I need this whatever list. I would like to have this list. Somebody pulls up and says, I have that, here you go, you can have it, I don't need it anymore. And he doesn't need to pick up any of your jewelry as a replacement. It's the thinking, it's a mind concept that people just don't get yet. And that's where we're going to struggle when this changeover from money occurs.
Yeah. I fully agree, completely agree. But I also see the need, at least in a limited sense, where, sure, you could have a list outside on your front door. This is the stuff I need, and maybe somebody's going to have it and they'll gift it to you, and awesome, beautiful, totally beautiful. But what if nobody has it? What if you need this really badly to continue with what you're doing, but it's just not available there? this is what I'm talking about a means of exchange, where you can say, you can get a hold of somebody that's 10,000 miles away, and they are producing what you require, but there's no way for you to actually interact with them other than, say, email. Is there a place without the greed and the desire for profit to say have some means of exchange, whether it be Bitcoin or toenail clippings? It doesn't really matter what the thing is, because again, it's only a representation of value, a representation of that exchange, rather, that you could say, yes, I need your widget. I have this. Would you accept that? Is that something you can use? And if it's something that's kind of universal that everybody can use, then that would become a means of exchange. I mean, it used to be spices. It used to be grains, foodstuffs. Many, many, many moons ago, that was the means of exchange. That was what people used to carry on these transactions, because it's still a transaction. And if you can do it without it, awesome, fantastic. That's, most definitely. But I can still see the need, at least, in a limited fashion for a while, where it would be useful to have something that's kind of universal, that everybody would accept, that you can take to Billy Bob, who makes furniture, and you need a table, but you have nothing he needs or nothing he wants, because you're an inventor and all you do is play with electronics all day, and he has, there's no point. Can you offer him something else? Can you offer him, I've got a jar of toenail clippings. Would you be able to use that to do something with that? And he can go, well, yeah, I know somebody who wants some toenail clippings. Sure, I'll do that. Again, it's kind of still thinking in the 3D money kind of model, but it's not a requirement, right? It's more just a means of getting along, right? So that nobody can say, well, I just give it away and I give it away, and I, every time I need something, it's never here. Because that's going to happen. There's going to be people who they want to do something, and in their area and the people that they deal with, their resources are just not there. And they have to go elsewhere to get it. And rather than move to a place that's there because they really like where they're living and they like the people that are around them, they have some means of sharing over distance with something that's agreed on as a universal means. You can still look at it as money, I suppose. But I think the difference here is that rather than it's a requirement, it's more of just a solution to settling your mind, settling, a means to an end, really.
I guess it comes into the question as well as to whether the technology exists for us to create whatever it is that we want, by means of some form of replicator, energy, matter conversion type thing, or whether that really is just fanciful science fiction.
Oh no! The replicator
existed as well.
Yeah. Oh, the replicators do exist. The technology exists. It's in extreme infancy right now, but we do have the capability of taking an atom apart and putting it back together any way we want, producing anything we need straight from energy. When that becomes mainstream, exchange doesn't matter. You're exchanging because you want someone to have something. If you're in a remote location and you need something, you go to your machine, you push a button, and you say apple, and it pukes out an apple. So that once we get there, that will eliminate the need for this means of exchange, because the resources will be available to everyone everywhere. We're not there yet. So in a as a bridge system, something like the blockchain tech. It doesn't have to be a Bitcoin. It could be call it whatever you want, but all it is a way for folks to exchange over distance who don't typically or normally or have the capability of interacting directly.
I have to have a conversation with a friend of mine that I used to converse with, which was Mike Montagna, as to whether he is embracing this new blockchain model, because he was certainly looking at programming what he refers to as, and trademarks actually now as, the mathematically perfected economy. And it was based on a public, transparent system of money and exchange, but it was done in such a way that it was a one-to-one balance. So if there was a value attached to something, there was also a depreciation based on its lifespan that gave it its value. So appreciated in value. There was no appreciation specifically, because everything you make starts in its pristine condition and should degrade from that point. It's not something that should ever get better, so the value shouldn't really increase. But he was looking at the technology, I think, that would allow that implementation to be public and transparent. And I think the technology for mathematically perfected economy and this blockchain be ideal. So I haven't spoken to him for a little while, since he and I used to do lots and lots of shows together. So I maybe could do with questioning him, because I know he was a little leery about Bitcoin originally, but that would be a prime applicant, I think, for the future technology of money, because it literally is a process that is totally public, totally transparent in its design, and totally fair, because there's no inflation that becomes a factor. That we don't lose 99% of the value of our currency because of what's been going on over the last century with money and how it's been manipulated and used. This is a totally secure and a totally stable implementation of money across all mediums. So I'd like to, I think, have a chat with him on that one, see where he is thinking these days. So that's something I should do.
All right. I'd like to put a call out for anybody who's listening to this, listen to the archives. If you know of a blockchain guru, someone who's working in the industry, who's well-versed in the industry, or you yourself are working or well-versed in the industry, I'd like to have you on the show to discuss the future of this blockchain tech. Where could we take it? How could we implement things like competency certifications, manufacturing confidences, and things like that using this blockchain tech, and if that's even a feasible thing to bring up. I also wanted to touch on today the 18 USC 1512. Which is about tampering with witnesses and evidence, but I don't think we have time for that. We've got about a half hour left. I'd love to open this up and hear some thoughts. We got a bunch of people in the room here. I know most of you probably haven't thought about this. I know Peter has, and I'm sure he's got a bunch of questions. Brianna's got the hiccups, so I don't really expect to hear from her today. But if you want to come out and put your 2 cents in and bring up some more questions, maybe some more fodder for more shows, other things we can look at, by all means, come on out and say hi. Let us know what you're thinking. And if nobody comes up, it's going to be a really quiet half hour.
Yeah, they don't want to talk after or before the show, never during.
Ignore the hiccups. I'm going to try to do this. I do have a question. That all you said about the blockchain being used as, for instance, instead of doing the property titles the way they're done now. That's extremely interesting, and I absolutely agree and love the idea. How do you see it with this current system, who will completely oppose it until it's gone, of course?
Well, it's who was it? Buckminster Fuller said that to change a system, you don't fix the old system. You create a new model, which makes the old system obsolete. And I think that's what this blockchain is going to do. A lot of people, it's brand new technology, as far as general population goes. So very few people understand how it works or even see the benefit of it. But that can change really fast. And we've seen large shipping companies moving to a blockchain registration of their shipping, taking it out of the centralized model, putting it into a decentralized model. We're seeing areas looking at land and property registries. It's going to blossom from here. And just like cell phones or the internet, it's going to take a little while for it to get going, but once it goes, people are going to get it, and they're going to see the benefit of this as long as we do it right. And I don't think it's going to take a whole lot to move over, because, like I mentioned before, the existing system is gone. It's the only reason we're still using it is because it's the only game in town. As soon as there's another game, we will move to the new game.
Well, nobody knows either, and that's part of the big problem. People don't realize or don't know that the system is defunct.
Yeah.
See, one of the things we've discussed as well, John, is that the system in place isn't actually a bad thing, because the structure, it could work wonderfully for any of these alternative technologies, because the infrastructure is already there. It's doing what we need it to do. Problem is how it's been implemented and used against us instead of for us. The licensing issue, okay, we change it from licensing to one of competency. Registrations, yeah, okay, registrations are fine, but it's not in the true sense that they mean for registration. You're not handing over title. You change it from registration to recording, or so that it's
a ledger.
It's an idea that there's a ledger, exactly. It just becomes a ledger that's public and transparent, so that everything can be checked. If you want to find out the ownership of a vehicle, then yeah, we still have a registration number for the vehicle. And does that registration number stay with the vehicle, or does it stay with the owner? Again, there are different ways to look at it, but the system is there. It can be changed over to something that's used for our benefit, and we can continue pretty much the way that we're doing now, with the same office buildings, the same people that may even be working in them. We just need to change the technology and the reasoning behind those particular establishments. That's what needs to change, because they're all about the control and the siphoning of money by way of, unreported or unlegislated taxation, which is in essence what it is. They just call it fees and get away with it.
Yep. And we've touched on this a couple of times. one of the ways to implement this beginning change is to question stuff. When you go and they say you have to register your house, question it. Does this create a trustee relationship? Well, I have no interest in a trustee relationship. I will ledger the information, but I do not consent to having someone else control this property. Bring it up, because the frontline guys, the guys at the office don't know. They all they have is paperwork. They've never thought about it. All they're doing is filling out forms and stamping papers. And you got to question it. You got to get them to question it. They're going to, when they realize this is all bullshit and it's detrimental to their well-being, they're going to have to talk to their bosses, and their bosses are going to get nervous, and they're going to talk to their bosses, and so on and so on and so on. The system will change. It has to change. If people are questioning it and they're going, no, I'm not going to play that game. I'm doing it differently. We now have an alternative. I want the alternative. The system has to change. There's no, it cannot sit and stagnate as it is now. The only reason why the so-called powers that were can get away with this stuff is because nobody questions them. Nobody is taking them to task on this. And, the limited amount that we've done this through the World Freeman Society, through TPUC, the other groups in England and the States, I can't speak for the other countries because I don't know, but it's been very limited. But we have had a major effect. I mean, the fallout that the World Freeman Society received just from asking questions was phenomenal. If everybody started asking questions, that fallout is going to be world changing. You go to the bank and you fill out the forms and everything. If you don't have to have the loan, if it's not something that's if you don't have it, your life is screwed. Question it. When you fill out the promissory note, go, well, is this not a promissory note? And they'll probably say, yes, it is. And this is, well, by definition, it's money. So why am I paying you twice? Ask the questions. Especially if they bring it to you. If they come to you and say, you have to do this, question it every time, because chances are you don't have to do this. They're doing it because it's profitable. Or there's a control. I mean, control is profit, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point about opening a bank account in the first place.
Mark's
we
here.
have apparently, under the legislation provided in all countries, I believe, the ability to open a personal deposit account for private use. However, when you go in and you ask to open a personal deposit account, they open a personal deposit account retail, which means that it's a business. It's a business account, and they can charge fees and all that shit. Whereas a personal deposit account for private use is there to be provided for the private individual in a private capacity, and there are no fees attached to it unless you agree.
Yep.
There's no requirement for your social assurance or social security number, national insurance number to be attached to these accounts either. But people don't go in and ask. They don't know about this. And even the people that you speak to, even the managers, put it that way, because I did the very same thing. I went into my credit union and had a 10-minute discussion with the manager about whether I needed to provide my social insurance number and whether this type of account existed. And I pretty much said, okay, I'll be in tomorrow morning. You can check with your legal department and we'll fill out all the necessary forms tomorrow. Being as confident as I was. Anyway, I came back the following day and there were the forms on the desk. And yeah, you were right. I'm sorry. And here you go.
Yep. You got to get the verbiage right, because if you don't use the exact right words, they just look at you like you're from Mars and nothing happens. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to get Corinne on here, because she's done this. She's really good at it, and she knows what to do. She knows how to ask the questions, and but she's being shy and doesn't want to talk. So we'll get her on one of these times.
Okay.
But you also did it too, Carl. But I think you went in just with the concept, and it just happened to work for you. You didn't actually force the issue. Is that right?
No, well, I didn't at the time. I didn't actually have sections from the Bank Act. I now have the relevant sections, so I can actually quote that, those sections in the Bank Act, and the sections that specifically state there are no fees attached to these particular accounts, and it literally is written into the Bank Act. They have to follow those rules because it's part of their license to exist. The Bank Act is there to control the banks. It's there as their governing body of rules, so they have to follow them. What they, like everything else, corporate-wise and lawyer-wise, if you don't know, then they will provide you something that's similar. So you ask for a personal deposit account, and they will give you one, but it's a retail personal deposit account, not a private one. And if you don't know the difference, how can you argue the point? And they're quite within their rights then to start charging you fees, and you can't say shit about it because you didn't specify at the very beginning. You didn't argue the point that your social insurance number wasn't required either, because it's not. It's not required on any of those things. You don't even have to provide it to get a credit card, even though they will ask you for it. But that's because they want to do a credit check on you, not because it's required to open a credit card account. It's not. You look at the legislation. It's not in there.
Yep.
So again, it's knowledge. You have to have that knowledge and lose the fear about confronting perceived authority in their area of supposed expertise, because it's not expertise. It's just indoctrination. It's a training method and a certain level of training that they're given that allows them to function in that position. But it doesn't mean that it's for your benefit. It's not. It's always for the benefit of that corporation. So you have to, train yourself. You have to educate yourself in all aspects so that you can learn this. Once you do, you have the ability to stand in great power, stand in your own power, and not argue with these people. You don't argue with them. You just point the facts out to them. Because once you start pointing facts out, they have not a leg to stand on. They have nothing to say in argument.
Well,
other than to just outright refuse you.
That's right. And this works especially well when they bring it to you. Because if it's something you need to have and you start questioning it and you raise hell, they can just say, bugger off, we're not going to deal with you, because they have every right not to do business with you if they so choose. Everyone has the right to choose to or not to contract. But if they come...
Not in the case of the banks, though. With these accounts, they are legislated to supposedly allow you to open these accounts. It's in their rules. So technically speaking, they're not allowed to do it. They do simply because they have the monopoly on it. But that's what happens. And unfortunately, who do you go to? You go to the banking ombudsman because, this bank isn't opening an account. It says in the legislation I'm allowed to do this. Ombudsmen have no frigging power either. They're just there as a satisfying authority, in quotes, that supposedly you can go to if you feel that you want remedy. And they give you shit.
Yeah,
you don't get the remedy from them.
Their job is to make you go away.
Yeah.
I found that out a long time ago. There's lots of folks out there whose job is it to make you go away. I want to plug Mark's YouTube. He's got a couple of YouTube videos out there. Those who've been following us know Mark's story, or at least parts of it. Since the last developments, let's say, he has chosen to make this entire fiasco absolutely public, which is going to raise, there's going to be a huge pucker factor going on in England. There's a number of people who are in deep shit, to say the least, because of this. And I hope there's not significant fallout against Mark and Lisa, because they're awesome people, doing a very difficult thing under trying circumstances and doing it really well, I might add. But for anybody that wants to get the details, the videos on YouTube, on Mark's YouTube channel, if you do a search for Operation Recovery Quacks, Quacks, you will find it. He's got 3 videos out. One's just an introduction, and then video 2 and 3 actually have a tremendous amount of information, but it's only a tiny bit of the picture. He's got some more videos coming out which will detail in more of this. It's listening to it. It's about an hour and a half, little over an hour and a half so far. And when I was listening to it, I spent most of the time with my jaw on the floor. I couldn't believe the audacity, the blatant fuckery that was going on. And it was absolutely blatant. I mean, these people, from what I heard, from what Mark was describing, these people think they are utterly untouchable and can do anything, and nobody is even going to see it. And this is something he's working very, very hard to change. And I think going public like this, I think this is a good thing. Expect some fallout, expect some, knocks on the doors and nasty things happening. But kudos to you, my friend. You're a brave man and doing an amazing job. He could use all the support he can get. As many people sharing this video and making this stuff public, let's make it viral. Let's get it out there so that he has the protection of numbers. Because if enough people know about this, there is nothing these people who are trying to hurt them can do.
Yeah, if there are anyone out there that has specific contacts for the TPUC and for Mark Salon, maybe I know Mark has been in touch, I think, with Mark Salon, but I don't know how much interaction that you guys have had. It needs to get out there. It needs lots of people. I don't know how many ex-forces, personnel that Mark is in touch with, because I'm pretty sure, a squad of ex-special forces on the grounds would. I'm sure that would keep a lot of people at bay. So we got stuff like that, but yeah.
We got 28
people.
We got 28 infantrymen with PTSD. Are you sure you want to piss them off?
Yeah. So now, anybody in Europe, especially get this stuff out. Get people down there to help them out. It happened from I forget his surname now, but Gentleman Tom and his wife being kicked out of their bungalow after paying a mortgage for 44 years, pretty much paid the damn thing over 3 times, and they still got kicked out of the house. But 150 people showed up at the door and kept the bailiffs away for a good long time. Again, it's only because of the background fuckery that goes on, and the way they work this in the background, that they kind of lost. So, yeah, we just need people down there just to stop this shit from going on. I'm just so fed up of hearing live feeds of, people being turfed out of their houses and cops being there physically removing people from the house. They have no, I'm sorry, this gets me mad, but I'm going to swear. They have no fucking right to do that. They have no authority to do that. I was a cop. I knew what the level of my authority was, and they don't have the authority to do it. Even with a warrant, they do not have the right. The only people that have that right to physically remove you are the High Court bailiffs, and that's only if they've been given true power under a warrant for physical removal. Otherwise, it's you legally and lawfully and voluntarily moving yourself from out of that property. But if you don't move, the police have absolutely no power to do it for you or for them. But they do, and you have to point that out. You are here to prevent a breach of the peace. And, sir, that does not mean that you can initiate any action against me, physical action against me or anybody else here, because that also means that you are then in breach of the peace, and you, sir, as an officer, will be arrested. Whether anything comes of that is a different matter. But again, you have to know this shit. You have to know. They don't have that right. They don't have that power, but they try and enforce it and scare people. Yeah, they don't have guns in the UK, but not most of them anyway. But unfortunately, they have a lot of knuckle draggers than they used to when I was a cop. And they don't teach you this stuff, so...
Yeah, just shortly after...
Get it out there. Just get it out.
Just shortly after I listened to Mark's videos, I had a USC or UCC legislation dropped in my lap, and it is 18 USC 1512, and it concerns tampering with. Let me bring it up here. Back to tampering with a witness, victim, or an informant, and it's very clearly states that anybody, and it doesn't matter who they are, who uses threats, intimidation, physical force, corrupt persuasion, threats, misleading conduct to stop someone from presenting evidence, telling the truth, accessing their lawful right to due process is, well, one of them is imprisonment for not more than 30 years, imprisonment for not more than 20 years, fined or imprisonment for not more than 20 years or both, fined or imprisonment not more than 20 years or both. Just for harassment, it's fined or imprisonment not more than 3 years. And this is UCC. This is international law. Okay, this applies everywhere. It may be a different number in your country, but that's the same thing. Have a look at it. Have a look at the ones around it, because a couple, from I would say 1500, 18 USC 1500 to say 1514 would probably all be relevant with that type of section. But 18 USC 1512, Mark, have a read at it, because this is a piece of legislation that you can stuff up the judge's nose, and he's guilty of half of the stuff that's in here. So, and it where did it say that? Because it's one of the things I was dealing with years ago. The cops wouldn't touch it because they said they couldn't prove intent. And there's one in here. Where did it go? It said you don't have to prove the offender's mind. So just the simple fact that they did it, you don't have to worry about proving intent. Where is it? It's in here. This is a fairly extensive document. There's quite a bit of stuff in it.
Mark was saying to put a link. I think you put that link in a little. So anybody who's interested, either scroll up a few pages and the link is there before today's or at today's show. He's posted it again.
Just put it in again, and that's the page from the Cornell Law School, and there's a lot of stuff in here. I'm trying to scan fast and it's not working. Anyway, read through it. Just about anybody who's involved with any sort of legal process, this is going to apply, and you will be able to use it. If for nothing else, but you can use it to intimidate them, because this is their own rules. And if they're not going to follow their own rules, then you don't have to follow them either. And
we said right at the very beginning, yes, when we were speaking to Mark about this whole process, that there is an awful lot of pushback. Mark did, and we see this every week. Mark and Lisa have done a superb job of standing their ground for the last 3 years. This has been going on. The most movement and the most I can't think of the word right now, but the biggest improvement they've had and progress that they've had within the last 6-8 weeks, probably. In fact, it's probably over 8 weeks now. That they've been able to backwards and forwards, John and I, in trying to help them proceed and stand their ground and act now with some authority and start pushing back with their own power, standing in their own power and moving against these people. And again, the pushback that you get from these, to some extent, can be proportional to what it is for them to gain. And as we've pointed out, they have 6.8 billion pounds worth of gain somewhere along the line. So there could well be corresponding pushback. That's part of the concern that we all shared in the early days. And I think that's really why we would like for them to be able to settle and just get out of this. But if that's not possible, then they have to do what they're doing right now, which is the police get that information out to everybody as much as they can to protect themselves and get people involved. If there are a lot of people that are, ex-servicemen that can be involved in this, get that information out, get them down there. I know what it's like, and more so with ex-servicemen. They stand shoulder to shoulder because that's what they were trained to do.
Yep.
This way, they're not doing it for Queen and country, they're doing it for each other. And that, in fact, that's always the case on a battlefield. They don't do it for Queen and country. They do it for each other. They protect each other's backs, and they need to do this out of the service now too. But we need to be there. If we live nearby, then we need to stand with these people, because when all's said and done, there's nobody else. The authorities are not going to support the little people. It just doesn't work that way. So again, get that information out there, get people to stand there with them, get them help, because we're not there. We'll do as much as we can through this show and through this channel, but we need boots on the ground.
Yeah. A couple of things. Yeah, a couple of things. Yeah, a couple of things. I agree, Carl. Numbers are going to protect the people. So the more people that know about what's going on with Mark and Lisa, the more people that are talking about it, the less power the pushback is going to have. Peter brings up the question, but isn't that U.S. code? Specifically, yes, it is. But there will be an equivalent. So use it as a starting point. If you're not in the U.S., if you're somewhere else, use it as a starting point in your research. You will find something pretty much the same thing in your legislation that you can use. Mark, you said you will be asking for common law jurisdiction. You don't ask, you invoke. If you ask for common law jurisdiction, you're giving them authority. You are the people with authority, not them. They are the perpetrators. Don't give the perpetrators authority. You invoke common law jurisdiction. Yeah, I'm not even going to repeat that, Peter. But no. It's generally speaking, you're in a position now where you are making the rules, and as long as you follow your own rules and you make them clear for everybody, you probably will prevail. But if you make the mistake of giving them jurisdiction, you're taking steps backwards, and you're going to continue this fight.
I think it comes back to that question as the court case that particular Wednesday, a few weeks ago now. People that seem to go into the courts and the judge leaves, they have many times stood in their power and said, okay, this is common law jurisdiction. Judge has left the room. Being the highest authority, I now close this case, dismiss this case, and leave. But the problem is that none of that's on the record. And even if it was, they will remove it so there's no evidence of it. So what people need to be doing is walking right up to the clerk of the court, who sits there at the front of that court, and say, now, make the order written that this case has been dismissed because the judge has left the courtroom. This case is now done. And I want written evidence to say that is the case.
Yeah,
whether you get it or not, I don't know, but you can certainly demand it and see what happens. Because if you don't, then they do exactly what happened with Mark and Lisa. They came back later and said, "Oh, I only stepped out for a quick adjournment, pee break kind of thing, and I came back and they weren't here. So we'll just rule for the applicants," and there was no defendant. So yeah, it's done.
Yeah. You have to you direct the clerk to record that the matter is now settled, or settled isn't really the right word, but I can't think of it.
It's dismissed.
Yeah, it's dismissed. It's no longer.
And without prejudice too.
Yeah, when he says
with prejudice.
Well, yeah, probably with prejudice in that case, because it was heard. It was heard, and it was found to be lacking. Mark, when he says he doesn't recognize common law, I would have fell over laughing, because he just admitted right then and there that he is not a judge. He's he has no authority. He admitted it when he said he doesn't recognize common law, because he has to. Well, common law is the superior law. It overrides everything.
Yeah, but with it being a private court, this is where we're getting into the territory. This is private court. This is not public. This is not really a court.
That's right.
It's
coming
together of people that make it look like a court.
It's a bank.
That's why he didn't recognize it, because exactly.
It's a bank.
You can say he doesn't recognize it because he doesn't have the. He's not in any aspect of jurisdiction of common law, and he is quite within his rights to say, I don't recognize it, because in this courtroom, in this room right now, I am the administrator of everything that goes on in here, unless you tell him differently. And you invoke that, and
but
you have to. You have to get him to change hats.
Yeah, but still, even in a private club, which is what that is, common law still applies. Common law applies everywhere. I mean, common law jurisdiction is the top of the heap. You can't get out of common law jurisdiction. There's no way to. Everything that goes on must be under common law.
Well, not if you're acting under contract, which is what's happening when you go into the room.
If it's specifically waived, then it's by agreement, yes.
Well, but if it's presumed, it's presumed at that point, because you've entered and you didn't either come in with a lawyer, or even if you did, you definitely presume to have waived all of your rights because you have a lawyer.
Yeah.
But because you didn't specify anything different, although in the case Mark did actually specify something, and this was going to be a common law jurisdiction, but he refused to allow it until it forced on him, and he eventually left the court. He had no choice at that point.
Okay, I'm not going to argue that point because I wasn't there, and there's a million ways that could go. Mia just posted, this is from the PDF I posted. The first and arguably most important principle is that there's no UCC outside the United States. That is entirely bullshit. The UCC is International Commercial Code. It's the Uniform Commercial Code. It governs all commercial transactions globally. Now, it may not be called the UCC outside the United States, but it still applies. And it
has to. That's because that's why international trade occurs.
Exactly.
Power or control over all the international trade. So there has to be something.
So yeah, I mean the concepts behind it are all there. It all does apply. I mean, in Canada, they say there is no UCC in Canada, but there is a Uniform Commercial Code in Canada because we deal with international trade. So yes, it's there. You just have to find out the right verbiage because they won't call it an apple, they'll call it a schmooze. And doesn't matter whether they call it a schmooze, it's still an apple. Yeah, it's word games. The whole frickin' thing is all just word games. And if you're not ready to play chess at 80 miles an hour, don't get involved. That's all I can say. So guys, what an awesome discussion. Too bad more people didn't have more questions. That would have been great. So next week, I don't know where we're going to go next week. I'd like to kind of pursue this blockchain thing because it's really interesting. But I need people who know more about it than I do because I've got lots of questions and I'd like to explore how it could be expanded into other areas and what that's going to look like on the well, for lack of a better term, the political arena. Because I do see it as a step into moving everything into the private, taking out of the public, moving it into the private, but still allowing public access. Or more or less reconciling the two systems, the public and the private, which would eliminate a whole bunch of the control system, which is what I'm really hoping for because we need it so bad. So we shall say goodbye for now and talk to you all next week. Thank you very much, Carl. Awesome talking to you. I hope you're enjoying your trip abroad.
Yeah, thanks again, John. I look forward to these shows every week now. I really enjoy doing them. I'm glad you're there as host and, of course, producer, because they wouldn't get out without your participation and capabilities in that regard. Yeah, and I know John's asking occasionally, but he's doing a fantastic job, not only for our show here, but for Danny and Lisa and lots of other things. So he really is living, off the grid, off the system as much as he possibly can. I am interacting with the system in a greater capacity than he is. But by all means, please keep him in mind. And if you have some spare dollars and pounds or whatever, please, donate, throw some his way, because it really does keep him going, keeps the shows going, and it shows a little bit of appreciation for something that he's doing out of the goodness of his heart right now. So thank you, John. To everybody else, much appreciate you guys showing up for the show. We have some regulars, we have some new people, and I think it's awesome. I'm just so glad you guys are participating and you enjoy what we do. So hope to see you again next week.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you all next week.